You're tuning into Black and White Sports on YouTube. The no-holds-barred truth on sports. The main event starts now.
All right, Black and White Sports supporters. Well, we're going to talk a little NFL, and particularly two quarterbacks that we cover a lot on this channel, and they will sort of always be connected now because the Cleveland Browns got rid of Baker Mayfield in order to bring in Deshaun Watson. And Watson just made some comments about he didn't want any negative energy coming towards the Cleveland Browns. Well, that's great, except you've got a member of the Cleveland Browns talking about their former quarterback, Baker Mayfield, and what if Baker would have remained on this team? And look, there's no secret. We've talked about it. The city of Cleveland still loves Baker Mayfield. All right, and here's Baker, 9-8 last year, 64%, 4,000 yards, 28 TDs, only 10 picks. So better than 2.5 to 1. Touchdown to interception ratio. This is PFF. This is their QB rankings, and Baker's at 19, and Deshaun Watson is sandwiched between a over-the-hill Ryan Tannehill and Aiden O'Connell, who has not proven much of anything. And now Watson has come out and said that they're taking it, you see it, one day at a time. I don't know that that's kind of update I'd want to hear about this shoulder. Via Zach Jackson of The Athletic, everything has been set in stone with the rehab schedule, and I haven't had any setbacks or anything that's holding me back. Watson added he's in a, quote, great state. Now, I think what's got a lot of people concerned is this is his statistics with the Browns. 60% completion percentage, 2,200 yards, 14 TDs, 9 picks in 12 games. All right, now they were 5-1, but it should be noted the Browns have arguably a top 5 roster in the NFL. And now you've got this. And the other thing is, and look, if I'm a Browns fan, I would not love that my supposed franchise quarterback did not want Joe Flacco back on this team. All right? I'm looking for a dog attitude. In other words, yeah, I know Joe Flacco showed his butt. I know the fans embraced him. I'm going to prove all those fans wrong, and I will keep Joe Flacco on the bench if he's back on this team. That's not what happened. He wanted Joe Flacco off of this team. He was intimidated by the fan reaction and, frankly, Joe Flacco's play. Because Joe Flacco came off the couch and looked better than Deshaun Watson has at any point with the Browns. And I don't want to hear about that game and a half where Watson looked, quote, pretty good. Not even good, but pretty good. All right, he still wasn't throwing the ball down the field, still wasn't flashing the athleticism. You've seen nothing of Deshaun that you got in Houston. And right now, I will still continue to hold on. When you factor in the contract, it's the worst trade in NFL history. All right, maybe you could argue Herschel Walker, and one could argue Russell Wilson in the Broncos. But I think this is the one. It's still baffling, and these comments are pretty wild from Browns guard Wyatt Teller. He was on the Go Long podcast and wonders what life in Cleveland would have been like had Baker stayed just one more year. I've said for a long time they never should have given up on Baker, and they never should have been flirting around with Deshaun. All right? Spurring Baker to go kiss my ass. I'm out of here. I don't blame him. I think Baker is matured enough to know where he would even say, Teller on Go Long said, I truly believe when they are talking to Deshaun, if Baker just said, hey, man, it's going to be okay. I have one more year on my deal. Everything's going to be okay. Just play. I truly believe he still would have been the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. I don't know every conversation, how it went. I have no idea, but I'm just saying he was beloved in Cleveland by the ownership, by the team, by the coaches, by the players, everybody, by the fans. So I think he should have let calmer heads prevail. Maybe. But I disagree with him on one point. This was on the clown show known as Jimmy Haslam. All right? We've talked about this at great length. Jimmy Haslam wanted Deshaun Watson, and he pushed to trade him. Deshaun even said, don't want to go to Cleveland. And that's why you had the fully guaranteed contract develop, because it took that fully guaranteed contract that could handcuff this franchise and has handcuffed them thus far. You got a $63.5 million dead cap hit this year, next year, year after. If this does not go well this year, I think the Browns will look for another quarterback, but they will not be able to let Watson go until after the 2026 season. And I think it's very telling that you've got an actual Cleveland Browns offensive lineman still talking about Baker Mayfield and what could have been. Now, you watch Baker, he almost won the most comeback player of the year. Joe Flacco actually did win it. And there's a world, and we have not talked about this, but I've said I think there's a good shot Jameis Winston is your starting quarterback at some point this season. I go back to something that Chris Sims said, not this past season, but I think the season prior, towards the end. I think it was. He said, how do we know Deshaun Watson will ever be the quarterback he was in Houston? And, of course, Chris Sims releases that yearly top 40 countdown, right, of quarterbacks. Well, he dropped Watson way down this year. And he said again, at this point, there's nothing that we know of for sure that leads you to believe that the guy that was in Houston may end up coming back. We don't know. And I think that's pretty accurate right now. Not to mention all the off-the-field stuff, which would have led me not to have even looked in his direction. I mean, that's how we got into the Deshaun Watson business, was chronicling his entire Houston fiasco with the massages, and the mainstream media didn't want to touch it. Outside of Florio, I'll give Florio credit. He followed the Deshaun Watson thing real close, and so did we over on the main channel, the big channel. But I think this is interesting, that you've got a current player still talking about Baker Mayfield. The fans still love Baker. And look, this is a Super Bowl kind of roster. And my fear for Cleveland fans, and we'll talk about it plenty of times this year, based on what happens, ebbs and flows, right? You've got a hell of a good coach. Kevin Stefanski is a good coach. But Haslam will fire him. And probably your general manager, who's done a pretty damn good job too. If they can't get Deshaun Watson working, he's going to flamethrow the entire team. And that in itself is going to be a disaster, because if Kevin Stefanski got fired, he will get hired immediately somewhere else. He's a hell of a good coach. He is. And he knows offense, which should raise a lot of eyebrows. Look what he got out of Joe Flacco. And even some of those other quarterbacks. P.J. Walker flashed a few times. But he can't seem to get through to Watson. Does Watson even want to still play in the NFL? Because he seems very checked out and very aloof at times. I'd be concerned. I would. By the way, I expect Baker, because they brought all their weapons back, to have another good year. And they're going to be right there for the NFC South title. Now, Atlanta will be right there. So will New Orleans. But there's no reason to think Baker's not fixing to do another 3,800 to 4,200, 25 to 30 touchdowns kind of season. I think he's just going to be better. He's more mature. He's a better guy. Tell me what you think. Peace. I'm out. Till next time.
Thanks for watching the show. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to tune in next time on Black and White Sports.